Hello coders, today we're going to be talking about the Drupal content management system. I'm joined today by Oliver Davies. Oliver is a senior developer at Microserve, a freelancer, a member of the Drupal Association. Oliver is also a documentation maintainer and a webmaster at Drupal.org, plus a co-organizer at Drupal Bristol, the PHP Southwest user group, and Drupal Camp Bristol. Hi Oliver, how are you doing?
Very well, Peter. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
No worries, no worries. Did you have a good week?
It's been a long week, seemingly. Yeah, the kids are back in school this week. It was half term last week, so it's been getting back into the swing of things.
Good. So you're a maintainer at Drupal.org. What does that involve?
So initially I used to work on Drupal.org as part of the Drupal Association. I was on staff of the association a few years ago, working on new features and developer tools on Drupal.org. And then when I left, I sort of wanted to carry on being able to do some of that. So there's a volunteer webmaster team that I sort of volunteered to be part of. It's just dealing, I guess, with sort of spam in the forums, just and maintaining sort of the running of the site rather than developing sort of new features for it.
Cool.
So it's just a way of me trying to sort of stay involved and keep sort of giving back.
So you also do you also help with the documentation, right? So how does that when new features come in, how do you handle documenting those features?
So I maintain sort of certain subsections to the documentation. Like PHP requirements is one of them. Some of the automated testing documentation. So I've got sort of set areas to cover, as well as sort of documenting my own sort of modules and themes that I'm releasing as well. So it's again very much a community-driven thing. I'll get sort of comments on the documentation that this needs to be changed or this needs to be updated now.
Right.
I'll go in and make those changes.
Awesome. Documentation is such an important part of frameworks and of open source things, and keeping those updated is very, very challenging. How many people are on that team that you work with?
I guess it changes from time to time. Like some people will come in, some people will go. I'm not sort of always doing it. I sort of come in and out myself and sort of work occasionally on it. I'm not sure the exact number is. I think there's always people changing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's also the fact that you are a webmaster. So does that mean that there's an element of DevOps as well that you work with?
Not as much these days. When I was on staff, I would be involved in that side of things. So Drupal has its own sort of Jenkins-powered continuous integration system for running automated tests against patches. So that was developed partly by staff on the association and volunteers. Not so much on that side of things anymore, but it used to be.
Right. That sounds awesome. How did you get involved in that?
I guess some of it is being on staff, sort of do some needs must sort of situation. We had a few system administrators on staff at the time. I was there sort of primarily as a developer,
right?
But then I do a fair bit of system administration and then some Jenkins as well. So it was nice to sort of cross over the two things, do more the DevOps thing.
I guess it also helps as well working for Microserve, because am I right in thinking that they also are they're an agency for Drupal 8 and 7? Is that right? That's what I.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we're an agency and we primarily do provide services around Drupal.
Right.
So we've been doing a lot of work on Drupal 8 over the last couple of years.
Yep.
That's always been our focus, really, back since Drupal 5, Drupal 6 days.
Okay, cool. How many people are working at Microserve?
I think it's around 25, maybe 30, somewhere in that area.
Wow. And
so,
what kind of stuff do Microserve do on a sort of a day-to-day basis? What are the projects like?
Generally quite interesting projects. I've been working on a project for the last sort of 12 months or so, working on a Drupal 8 commerce-based event management booking system.
Wow.
So it's for a UK charity, and the thing is primarily running events around the UK.
Right.
So some are free, some are paid, and this is based on Drupal 8 commerce.
Okay.
So each event is its own product, and then purchasing an event is an order for that product. So
right.
It's not maybe not a traditional use case for commerce, but it works well.
Good. So Drupal it's a content management system, right? It's a way of managing content, I guess. I should say that I've had experience with Drupal, but on a very light level. So as a freelancer, some clients that I've had previously, they've asked me to sort of jump in and sort of tweak a couple of things here and there. I've never installed Drupal from scratch. Like, I've never created a project from scratch. So can you say how different Drupal is compared to other content management systems, i.e. Concrete 5 or something? Where does it differ?
Yeah, it's also been referred to as a content management framework. That's also what I've heard it mentioned. So I can't speak too much about Concrete 5, but I know sort of other CMSs, at least in sort of previous years, you sort of installed it, and then you had sort of what you had out the box. Right. And then to add anything more to that was quite challenging. You did through a lot of sort of plugins to get to what could be classed as fairly basic sort of content modeling, whereas Drupal has had a lot of that out of the box already. So it's more a case that there was a saying, I saw a tweet a while ago, a few years ago, and it was saying something like, if you want to build a CMS, use WordPress. If you want to build WordPress, use Drupal. So it's almost of a step back, so you can do sort of all your content modeling and building up all of your content types and fields at the Drupal level, and then that then becomes just a CMS. You're not locked into one particular sort of way of doing it. It is super flexible.
Okay, so it gives you the framework to build your content management system in the way that you want to build it. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's got a primary sort of notion of content types. Right. So you get a standard sort of piece of content, which in terminology is called a node, and then a node could be one of any number of content types. So the standard distribution comes with pages, basic pages, and articles. Right. But then you could add, anything else that you want. So it could be an event, it could be, a frequently asked question, it could be anything. It's totally in your power to add these content types to match whatever your content model is. Okay,
so it's is it fair to say that it isn't opinionated in the way that you should be presenting data or listing data or where the data comes from? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's probably fairly opinionated on the back end in terms of the way it structures all of your tables and all your database schemas. Okay. That it does all that for you. So when you're adding a new content type, and then fields to that content type. Okay. It's on how to generate all the tables in the database to store that data. Yeah. So from that perspective, it's quite opinionated because you can't really go in and change the way it does that side of things. But certainly from a front end perspective, or from like a site builder perspective, you could install Drupal. Go, I need X, Y, and Z content types. Add those and say, okay, one of those is a blog article, so that needs tags, it needs an image, it needs sort of related articles, it needs an author. The author could be another content type again, or it could be a user. So it's the power is within that sort of site builder sort of role. So you don't necessarily need to be a coder to work with Drupal, as long as you can sort of install it. Okay. And so you get this sort of point and click style building. Okay. So Drupal has this term of site builder, right? Which is not necessarily a developer, but it is just somebody who can sort of install and build a site primarily through the UI without writing any code. Sure. Which is really one of the really awesome things about it.
Ah, yeah. Okay. I can see where that is kind of has the WordPress feel? How, because there's so many people who will look upon WordPress as something that they can just spin up quickly without writing any code, and then they have a blog. If Drupal is that, but for content management systems, I could see the appeal of that. But how flexible is Drupal if you want to build plugins or any kind of extensions?
It's really to do that. So that's my sort of primary sort of thing, I guess. So I consider myself being sort of a full stack developer.
Right.
Most of the time, I'm sort of writing custom modules for sites. So there is a whole library, like thousands of plugins or modules for Drupal to add extra functionality.
Okay.
And so in the case of maybe you want something quite bespoke, or something doesn't exist, then you can just start writing your own.
Right.
And they are really, really sort of, once you sort of figure out how to do it, it's just, when you install Drupal, by default, you get a modules directory, and there you just start adding your own sort of custom code.
Okay. And is that something that you do quite a lot of at Microserve?
Yeah, quite a lot of that. I think that's probably my primary sort of thing is module building.
Do you guys have like a suite of modules that you use or that you've developed yourself on various projects?
Yeah, I think most of us have got sort of preferred sort of modules. We've got a handbook, which is a Drupal site that we use internally for the whole of our documentation. So in there, we've sort of got some sort of recommended modules that we tend to use. We do have, or we used to have, maybe coming back, like our own distribution. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of the new version is pretty much a composer file with core and X, Y, and Z modules that we use frequently with some existing configuration that we can sort of reuse rather than start from scratch every time, which is quite nice.
Awesome. Does it? You mentioned Composer. Does Drupal have a command line interface?
It has several. So there's been there's one called Drush, which is the Drupal shell.
Drush.
So it's not part of core, but it's an additional download.
Okay.
I've been using Drush for years and use it for pretty much everything from first installing Drupal, enabling, disabling modules, creating users.
Right.
That whole thing. So that's been there since, before I started. So Drupal 5, Drupal 6 days. This was about 10 years ago. With Drupal 8, there was a separate project called the Drupal console.
Right.
So this is very much Symfony console for Drupal and built on Symfony console. Initially, it was like a code generation scaffolding tool. Mm-hmm. So you want to create a new module, you'd run the generate module command, and it would scaffold that out for you.
Right.
But as time has gone on, there's more of an overlap between Drupal console and what Drush is doing. It's actually not just code generation, but interacting with your site, like enabling modules. So, the console is Drupal 8 only, whereas Drush has previous versions, class previous versions as well. And there is talk of adding an official CLI into core itself, so similar to your sort of Symfony in console or your sort of artisan for Laravel. There is talk of actually putting something in core, which would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. Is there any other major differences between, say, Drupal 8 and Drupal 7?
Considerably, and not just even maybe from a code perspective. For versions 7 and earlier, there's a big sort of I get this thrown around. Which one is the one where you don't write? You write all your own code. One is not invented here, and one is something else. So for Drupal sort of 7 and earlier, pretty much everything in Drupal is written by Drupal developers.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely sure of this, but I think at some point, really early on with the Drupal phase, there was some third-party code which had like security vulnerability in it or something, which sort of really turned off the maintainers for integrating third-party code. So everything was sort of written by Drupal Serve itself.
Right.
Drupal 8 then it's the complete opposite of that, really. So Drupal 8 integrated parts of Symfony 2 at the time.
Right.
And a lot of Drupal 8 is built on a number of Symfony components and a number of Drupal components that sit on top of those. So there is like a real sort of shift in sort of the ideology almost of Drupal to sort of bring in a lot of this third-party code, primarily Symfony. Parts of Zend components are in there, Symfony CMF, Stack. I can't think of everything, but yeah, there's a real sort of difference from that perspective.
Right.
Drupal 7 was probably more similar to like your WordPress style coding as well, so a lot more sort of functional, sort of global functions, global constants everywhere for the most part. Some parts of core were using some sort of classes and object orientation, whereas Drupal 8, everything primarily is written as a class.
Right.
And this has been moving away from sort of our old sort of systems to a more modern, standardized approach, which is pretty cool.
It sounds like Drupal 8 has had a massive injection of change. That must have taken a long time to manifest. How long did that take? Do you know?
I think it was about 5 years, start to finish.
Jeez.
And the Symfony integration wasn't right at the beginning, if I recall correctly. But there was sort of a meeting between sort of the prominent sort of PHP developers and Fabien Potencier, the Symfony maintainer. How could we potentially integrate all this together?
Yeah.
It happened quite organically. So Larry Garfield, who was one of the Drupal core maintainers at the time, is very big in the PHP sort of wider community as well. And there was, I believe, like a need for the thing that he was maintaining. So, this thing would be really good to integrate this component. Right. So I think that was maybe like the primary driver for it. It may have been database abstraction, but I can't recall. And then from there, it sort of snowballed and sort of became like the main thing. And then in the end, I think Drupal 8 itself was sort of slow as we wanted to get Twig in. Twig came in quite late.
Wow.
But that was quite a big thing. Traditionally, like every major version has been more or less a rewrite. From 6 to 7 wasn't too bad. 7 to 8 is quite a big jump. Right. But I'm glad to say that's changing in Drupal 9. So we're taking more of the Symfony type approach. So 9 is going to, like, throughout the Drupal 8 release cycle, we've been deprecating classes and methods. And then Drupal 9 essentially is going to be Drupal 8 without the deprecation. So if you're using all the latest everything, then release 9 should be pretty straightforward, hopefully.
Yeah.
And there's going to be I think it's a 12-month overlap between 8 and 9 for people to get this thing figured out.
Oh, right. Okay. So that sounds, because I guess there's going to be a lot of BC breaks, right? There's going to be a lot of things that will just break, once they go to Drupal 9. So you kind of need to have that soft period of deprecating things and moving things across. I've noticed that this is the case with a lot of frameworks and a lot of projects where the thinking and the architecture underneath has changed, and they want to improve, but the only way to improve is to deprecate and remove. So they have to have this sort of like this period of time of working things through. And it's great.
I mean, it's been quite interesting because we're moving towards more the Symfony type approach. But so since when Drupal 8 was released, every 6 months there's been a new minor version.
Right.
So we're on 8.7 is due to be released soon.
Right.
So the nice thing about that is we've been able to make these changes, so the non-breaking changes, throughout the process. Whereas in Drupal 7, we couldn't really do that.
Yeah.
So everything was sort of fairly static, for a better word, at that point. But it's been really great because we've been able to add sort of new features like migrations. The Migrate suite has been added throughout that process. JSON API, I know, is one that's going into core soon. It just means we can just keep iterating on things. So that's been a real big difference for us because we get Layout Builder is another one. This is a new Layout Builder going into core. So that's really great to see these new things coming in, and we can go to clients and ultimately say, "Oh, we've got this new way of doing layouts. This is pretty awesome." Media is another one. Media integration going into core, which is pretty great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it sounds like Drupal is a very good. I mean, like I said, I've never installed it myself. I've only just worked on Drupal projects, but it sounds like it's I'll check it out. I think because it sounds like a very good way of creating content management systems. How you talked earlier about the way it handles databases and stuff like that. Can other external sources of data come through? So, for example, if I had an API somewhere which handled all the heavy lifting, and I just wanted a content management system that called upon that API, could I do that fairly easy?
I'm not sure there are ways of doing it, and there are several that all come to mind at the same time. There is a module called Feeds,
right?
Which I think is maybe in core, or at least there is a contributed module. So that, I guess, primarily is maybe through RSS back in the day. So you'd give it a feed URL or something. But there are different sort of integration points for that. So maybe that could be done from an API.
Okay.
There are ways to say it has a built-in sort of migration that's slightly different. So that might be if you're moving from an earlier version of Drupal to a newer one, or like I've done migrations from sort of Laravel to Drupal 8 or other things as well.
Okay.
Give it to any sort of database schema.
Right.
That I think is more of like a one-time sort of thing, just to get your data in there, rather than you could just sort of do it sort of as a periodic thing. If you wanted to, or you've also got the option of making a custom module as well. So I was trying to think of an example. We did some work on a site year before last where people would go to a third-party service, fill in essentially a web form, and when they submitted the form, it would send a big XML payload to various places, one of which being the website that we were building. So within that custom module, I was able to expose a route that accepted a post request. That got all the data through. And then on the Drupal side, I was able to sort of do some transformations based on the data they'd sent to convert sort of number of days to be a date field, for example.
Okay.
Or take, I'm trying to think of an example, a branch name. So maybe it comes through as the branch is Bristol. It's an XML, so just plain text. Well, then there I could do lookups to say on the Drupal side, that's an entity reference. So an office is a content type, and then a job is a content type. We want to link those two things together, right? So as part of that transformation, I can say, okay, Bristol, do we have an office with a title of Bristol? And then rather than storing it as plain text, we can store the reference to the branch node and link the two up that way. So that's always a fallback option as well. You've also got a lot more sort of control, like in that example there, if you do it the custom way, which you may not get in something that's more generic.
I ask because an example that I was speaking to someone a few days ago, in fact, was they had a series of APIs, and they were looking for a way of managing that in some form of form. So they would be sending post requests. Well, they would first of all they would sign in to something, and then they would do a GET request to get that information back, and then they would do a post request to post it back. But they were just looking for a way of managing that piece of software, and Drupal might help. I don't know with that. The thing that I could sort of I was coming up with was just building simple forms in, say, Symfony 4 or something that then was doing a sort of a guzzle request back to wherever the data is stored.
The nice thing about that is say Drupal uses some of those components. So it uses guzzle under the hood. Yeah. So if you use Drupal's HTTP client, it is guzzle.
Right.
Essentially. So just to that point, what you said about multiple integrations, I know one of our other developers, Sophie, has written a module called Simple Integrations.
Right.
So we use that on a number of our projects, which gives you some more of a UI for, you can go and enable or disable certain integration. I haven't yet used it on any of my projects, but I know she's been using it on quite a few. Well, that's one that we've written for YJ that we've contributed back to the community.
Awesome. You've made a very good point there about the UI. It's like, so I'm more than happy to build all these things, but it's the actual interface. It's the making it look usable and be usable. I'm not. That's not my speciality. And Drupal is kind of attractive in that sense because it has those already, rather than having myself to actually build everything.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you said about Symfony's form component. Like, so Drupal has its own form API as well.
Right.
So if you're building, let's say maybe the simple integration example, or just to your example, if you did say, I want to ping this URL, then we can, rather than hard coding that in a module, you could have a settings form so that your client could go in potentially, log into the site, go to some admin/config/ this module, and we can expose that URL as a setting.
Right.
And as long as you're using Drupal's form API, it will build that form for you. Mm-hmm. And as long as you tell this is a text field, this is a text area, this is required, this isn't, do that form for you.
Yeah.
And it's got its own administration theme, which I think was added. It's a default in D7.
Right.
But yeah, there is quite a nice sort of separation between this is the front end of your site, the sort of the end user see, and then you've got this whole sort of admin area that anybody can, if you've got the right permissions, obviously, to go in and administer these things. So if you see, it's maybe easy to sort of like the easy bundle in Symfony, like that type of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it gives you that very clear sort of separation. And then Drupal's roles and permission system can be quite flexible. Right. I was going to say can be quite complicated, but is very flexible again in terms of this user has X, Y, and Z roles. Yeah. These roles have ABC permissions. So when this user logs in, they're going to see all this extra stuff that, that a regular user won't be able to see.
So is that a bit like an access control list where you can sort of say this user has these roles and these roles are then associated to these methods or these rights to do with the system, edit, admin, add, delete, and so forth? Yeah.
Yeah, there's obviously a number of this whole sort of matrix of checkboxes where you get to roles across the top and then permissions down the side.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, core will give you a load out of the box. Awesome. So you add your content types. Yeah. So you've got to add a job content type. That will create a number of roles. Mm-hmm. So you've got to add job nodes, edit job nodes, edit any, edit own, delete any.
Yeah.
It creates this whole sort of set of permissions for everything.
Right.
It's up to you then, sort of as a sort of administrator, to delegate those roles, to delegate the permissions to the relevant roles. Mm-hmm. So you could maybe have a job editor who can add but not publish, or something else who can then, do the review, but then take it from draft to sort of publish mode as well.
Okay, cool. So let's move away a little bit from Drupal itself and actually start talking about the bits and pieces that you've been getting onto, because you've done an awful lot recently. First of all, you're a certified Drupal Grandmaster. What does that mean?
It sounds cool.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
What's the full title?
Acquia Certified Drupal 8 Grandmaster.
Awesome. That is a very good full title.
It sounds cool. It looks good on the TV.
Yeah.
So Acquia Acquia is a company.
Yep.
That was founded by, I'm going to say this wrong, Dries Boytaert,
right?
Who's the original project creator of Drupal. Mm-hmm. So he wrote the framework initially. He then co-founded a company called Acquia, primarily to provide support and some enterprise level backing to the project. A lot of enterprise companies will go, this thing is open source, but we need X and Y sort of SLAs and this sort of support level. So they offer sort of support and hosting and certifications on Drupal. So it's I see a lot of people. I've seen blog posts. People said Drupal's parent company, Acquia,
right?
Which isn't technically right, but they do. There is a big crossover
right
there. So they employ core maintainers and people to work on the project full time in some aspects. But there is a very, I'd say, tight coupling. But there's a coupling between Drupal and Acquia.
Okay.
So
what does
Microserve are Acquia partners. We work with Acquia quite a lot on some big projects. And part of that is the certification. So they've got different certifications for different versions. So I've sat the Drupal 8 certifications. They've got a generic developer one, which covers sort of front end and back end aspects. Then there's also a site builder one. So that one I haven't sat. But then there are two specialist exams.
Okay.
One is front end and back end, essentially. So obviously they focus on their respective sort of areas. So and once you've sat those three, you then get the title of Grandmaster, which is pretty cool. So
awesome.
In addition, I've also then sat the Cloud Pro certification as well last year, which is the one primarily focused around their hosting offering.
Right.
So I've got those four. We've got, I think last time I checked, at least there were 8 or 9 in the UK.
Yeah.
3 of them work here. So myself and 2 others.
Wow.
So we've, as I say, we're a smaller team, or a medium-sized team, I'd probably say. But we've got the ratio of certifications to people here is quite high.
Yeah.
Always encouraging sort of people to do the exams, not just the developers either. We've got a couple of our sort of project managers are keen to start doing sort of the site building certification to sort of really understand what the thing is that they're managing, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. I like hearing that. I like hearing that the other people who are not only who aren't developers but are very sort of like close to developers are taking a deep interest into what the developers do in their certifications and so forth. That is cool. You say you took exams. Can you talk about what that was like? How long was the exam? That kind of stuff.
It's quite similar to this. So they were all online to begin with. I think the Symphony ones you can only take in person until quite recently. But they both use some online. So you go install some software, show up at a certain time. It locks down your machines. You can't switch between windows or anything like that to be cheating.
Yep.
And then somebody is proctoring the exam on the other side. So somebody sat. You've got to have your webcam on. Your microphone has got to be on for the whole time. Okay. And someone's on the other side. You've got to take your glasses off, show them to the screen to make sure they've not got Google glasses on or something, I guess.
Wow.
And someone sat there watching the whole time. I think it was like maybe they were all through like 90-minute exams, if I recall correctly. I think the site builder one is an hour, and then the others are also 90 minutes, I think.
Gosh.
So, they're pretty, I think there were about 60 questions, I think, in each one.
Right.
And the pass mark varies, which I found out afterwards, based on which exam you're taking. So, I should have known that beforehand, really. So, but they're quite interesting.
Are they sort of multiple choice? Is it an interview in the sense of they are asking you questions, or is it like a Cody type thing where you're sharing screens and you're writing code for them to review?
It's multiple choice,
right?
Primarily. So, it's one of sort of 4 answers, and it could be one or multiple, based on the question. Some of them are quite sort of not Drupal at all. One was, given we've got this set of markup, and the markup has got an ID and some classes and an inline style, and it's like, which color is the text? And it's like, it could be that one or that one. There's definite, it's not all Drupal specific. And again, that sort of play, especially with the Drupal 8 stuff, again, we're putting in parts of Symphony, there's some sort of Symphony related questions in there, some automated testing questions in there. Say some sort of real sort of, which color is this text going to be, sort of CSS questions. As well. So, like which of this piece of code is not secure? It's like, I should know this one.
Well, that's a good question. That is a very good question. It's quite an important question. Because security is quite a big issue in this industry.
Sure.
So you also did a talk or two talks recently, didn't you? At Drupal user groups. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, so I did two. The most recent ones I did were at Drupal Camp in London.
Okay.
So I've been quite lucky to speak at all but one of, or at least been selected at all but one of them. So the first one I went to was in 2014,
right?
I think. I gave my first one on Git and Git Flow. That was my first ever conference talk. I gave one talk at a user group in Cardiff prior to that. So that was like, I might as well submit a talk. And they got approved and then haven't really stopped since.
Awesome.
I was going to do one or two last year, and then the snow happened. So I don't think any of us from Bristol or from, I live in South Wales, so it's hard for me.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of us from Bristol even got to London for camp last year.
Right.
This year we did make it. It was almost the opposite. We had 20-degree heat the week before. It was lovely.
Yeah.
So I went and I submitted, I think, 4 or 5 talks, I think.
Right.
All in all. So we had about 100 submissions from 40 slots, I think, at the end of the day. So it was a 3-day conference. One was the Friday was more business focused, agency leaders, that type of people. So not developer focused on the Friday. Mm-hmm. And then Saturday, Sunday is more sort of developer, not developer focused, but development, site building, sort of technically focused.
Yeah.
So it's not just developers. Again, I got 2 accepted this year. One was on automated testing, which I gave at London once a couple of years ago. I did that one at Drupal Dev Days in Lisbon last year, most recently. So it's an updated version on that for London.
Right.
And then I did another talk on Drupal.org and its API. I was doing some work with that last year. We rebuilt the website, Microserve website last year.
Right.
I went to PHP UK and sort of watched Flake Van Hilton talking about Spatie and their open source. And they've got a whole page on their website. Like, these are the Laravel packages that we maintain. These are the PHP packages we maintain. So I was thinking, how can I build something like this for Microserve website?
Right. And
started working with the Drupal.org API, which I knew about having been on staff previously. So there's an open API to get sort of user data or data about a certain module or a theme, let's say download counts, number of sort of stars on there, that type of thing. So similar to your sort of GitHub style. So I started working with this, thinking, how can I integrate this? And then started integrating with the API, and then realized that this doesn't necessarily need to be even within Drupal. So I ended up writing a PHP library with its own separate package. Had this discussion beforehand: library versus package. Library inside a package that's released on packages.
Right.
That communicates with the API, with Drupal.org API. And I've written in a couple of modules based on that API. So the API library is a dependency of the module by a composer. Yeah. And pull those in and get, again, there's an admin settings form. I can specify Microserve supports these projects. Then the module go and get the data from the API. And again, then Drupal is responsible for caching that data. Right. And also providing the sort of customizability, making upwards of that. So that was pretty cool. So that, and I did another sort of little module based on that. So the second talk was talking a little bit about how to sort of build this library and this package. I did a little bit of a demo of that, ran the test for that, and then sort of did more of a demo of the actual module layer. That's been something we've seen, like that's been happening within Drupal for like MailChimp has got a module that's built on their library. So it's been a thing for a while. This company called Commerce Guys who write Drupal Commerce. They took this approach for some of their more recent ones. So when they moved from Drupal 7 to rewrite Commerce to Drupal 8, they feel like they've got a quite complex sort of addressing library and tax library. So again, so why does this need to be inside Drupal? Let's make that in its own module. and that went into sort of FoxyCart and Cilius and possibly Magento, and all these other frameworks started using it. So it's been, again, a bit of a trend with the adoption of Composer to really sort of start breaking down packages, like which are the reusable parts. Specific parts. So I did this on a project, the current project I'm on, I was doing this recently. So just bringing that slightly different approach to sort of people who maybe aren't familiar with packages or Composer to sort of start thinking, like, again, which parts do you need to keep in your module? And which parts could you make into a generic package you could then reuse in other versions of Drupal or Symfony or enter framework name here.
I really like that notion of breaking things up into smaller reusable parcels that you can share around. And I really like what you were talking about with the sense that you went to a talk and you were inspired by this page. You then went and built that for Microserve and all the components that were required for that, and then you open sourced it.
Yeah, I think Sparsy are pretty awesome as well. Like, they've got, I think it's like 6-person team in Belgium.
Right.
I think stuff's being downloaded like 2.5 million times a month now.
Wow.
Like, the open source is crazy, man. So the talk that Frank gave is building Laravel, a dashboard with Laravel.
Right.
But as part of that, he'd talk a little bit about their open source.
Right.
And I was sort of familiar with Sparsy.
And that was the thing that inspired you to kick that off.
Yeah, I mean, I've been open sourcing Drupal modules, for quite a certain amount of time. Sure. But it was quite nice to sort of bring that almost sort of company level focus to it. Yeah. So hopefully that's going to be going out, because it's a selling point for them. Yeah. In terms of like, and also for us. And if we're going to a competitive pitch, you're the 10th Drupal agency we've seen today. What makes you different? Yeah. And that's something that we can like call on to say, no, we contribute. Like, there's a thing, Drupal is free and it's open source. And in my mind, I've been doing Drupal full time for 10, 11 years at this point. Right. So, I don't, like, I've learned this thing. I've been supporting my family. My family has sort of grown through this whole process, 2 kids and everything, and that's all like paying my mortgage, paying the bills, all been based on this thing that, I don't pay for. So for me to spend a bit of time giving some of that stuff back, to me, is a bit of a no-brainer. So I try and bring that sort of slightly different mental thing to it. Whereas, I'll start building a module and I'll go, does this bit is obviously quite specific to a client who needs this form. And this bit is because it's got to get stuff off a queue and do things, right? But this middle bit is generic. So why not, make a module out of it? Yeah. And so the last project, I think I had made sort of 5 modules. Really? And sort of open source them. And one depends on the other, but it's just looking at a slightly different way.
Is there a disadvantage to this though? Is it that there are now more spinning plates that you have to maintain?
Maybe to some degree. I do hear that sometimes. Maybe we don't have time to make that a thing open source, and maybe there's a point to that. I've been doing that for so long that it's pretty much second nature. It's I push it to a different Git remote and pull it into Composer, and it's more or less the same for me as it would be doing it in a module. I guess. But then I've been really trying to. Those came out of taking more of a sort of open source first approach. So rather than like the way I've seen it done before is like I'll write all these modules. I'll write them in our modules directory. You typically have contrib for contributed modules, like public ones. Okay. And then custom for your custom modules. You can easily see which ones are. Yeah. And the normal thing is, at the end of the project, we'll go back and we'll open source them. Right. And like I said this on a project about a year and a half ago, and I haven't done it because I'd be straight onto another project. Whereas if you sort of start with that sort of open, and you've got to go through and clean out all your namespaces and make sure you've not got any client stuff left in there, and you don't leave your client name in the module something, right? Yeah. Not that I've done that. But it's that extra sort of step that you need to do. Yeah. And whereas if you do it contrib first, write everything essentially white label to begin with, pull it back into the project, then you've not got that extra step at the end.
Certainly,
I did one for .mailer.
Right.
There was a Drupal 7, but not one for Drupal 8. Mm-hmm. So, there's quite a specific set of criteria for our clients. So, we need somebody to fill in a form and they get subscribed to this list. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. Mm-hmm. That now is its own module. But what I've then got, I sit there and I'll think, it'd be good if it did this, it'd be good if it did that. I'd be driving home thinking it'd be great to do this. So I'll just start making issues. And they'll just put them in a queue, and each module's got its own issue queue.
Right.
So it'd be good if it did, X, Y, and Z. Or in the case of, I did one called system user. So if a user needs to create, nodes, or in this case, send messages, like which user does it get sent from? I don't really want to go hard coding in magic user IDs, which are going to change depending on the environment.
I guess also you're forcing yourself to be a little bit more abstract as well, because you're not thinking about it in the sense of this can be used just for this single client. You're thinking of it in terms of, well, I could also be using this in other clients, and so let's sort of change our thinking from and have more of an abstract look upon the project, and also an abstract look upon the architecture as well.
Yeah, and I think that's, we've got this list of issues or feature requests, and, what we did was enough to come back to the time point. It's like, I'm not going to write, the client wants this little tiny piece. I'm going to write the massive or signal dancing module. So I'll still write enough to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah.
And then, when we've got time, let's jump into that feature request list and start, adding some new things. And we had a contribution day the week before last. Right. So we all not down tools because we had tools, but we were complying with the day. We worked on the actual modules. So when we came to it, we had a nice list of ones that from the stuff we'd already worked on, which was quite nice, or just ones that on a bug in a module that we need for project X. So we'll tag it as being a Microserve issue. And then when we came to it, we had this list of issues ready to work on. We had a super productive day, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I guess you really need to be hot on the testing when you're doing something like that. When you've got packages and modules and stuff that are shared amongst different clients using them in totally different ways, I would imagine you have to be quite cautious with testing and all of that jazz. One of your talks was on testing, am I right?
That's right.
Yeah. Is there? I'm assuming that Drupal can do all of the usual testing that the unit testing, integration testing, all that stuff, acceptance testing, and so forth. Does it use? Can it use things like Codeception, PHP unit to do all that stuff, or does it have its own mechanism?
So, short answer is yes. So currently, back in so Drupal 7 is sort of the legacy version. I think that's maybe the technical term for it.
Okay.
So that has its own testing built into core, which is based on a library called Simple Test,
right? Which
is quite an old testing framework, which I think is pretty much only used by Drupal 7 at this point, as far as I know. I think the version there is even sort of a forked version of that, possibly, I think. Then with so when we started moving to Drupal 8, everything sort of came across as simple tests. Right. And then again, through the adoption of third-party components and code, PHP unit was brought into Drupal 8 core.
Okay.
And there's been this an initiative called the PHP Unit Initiative that we're migrating all of our tests and the legacy simple test system to running PHP Unit. And this was completed, I think, last week. So there's currently no more simple tests in Drupal 8 core. Everything is based on PHP Unit. So it obviously uses PHP Unit for doing unit testing. It then uses Symfony's unit test, Symfony's PHP Unit Bridge,
right,
as well as testing for deprecation, and then uses does functional level testing, again, based on, it's not using Behat, but it's using part of the Behat Mink drivers to do browser testing and actually testing, sort of making real requests and responses. Installs Drupal behind the scenes. You tell it which modules to install. So it's doing everything in sort of a very idempotent. That's not the right word. Like it starts with a new Drupal site for every test. Enables what you tell it to enable. Does your sort of setup steps. It creates your users. Does create your nodes and then run your assertions. Tears it all back down again and then does it again for each test. So the functional test can be a bit slower. It's having to do this, before every test. Although it's doing sort of a minimal sort of bootstrap of core. But yeah, you are able to make sort of actual responses, request responses and things.
Do you
and there is also, like an intermediate, like integration level testing with what Drupal 8 calls kernel tests. So again, it's not doing a full, sort of browser level test, but it is doing sort of integration level. So you can do get your service out of the container. And get your configuration. And so the other big thing for Drupal 8 was all of your configuration got exported into files. So it's a big config directory. Sort of similar again to sort of how Symfony works, where you make all your UI changes in the Drupal admin. You then export that into files. And like I say, in Drupal 7, this wasn't a thing. It was all sort of stored in the database. So for this module test, you're going to need X and Y roles and these fields to exist. So you can install those as part of your test as well. So they need more setup to do. You need to be quite specific. I want this module's config and this module. Whereas then at the bottom level, you've got your standard sort of unit testing level with all your mocks and spies and all those good things there as well.
Awesome. Am I right in thinking that people who are new to Drupal should start with Drupal 8 instead of Drupal 7? Is that the preferred way now?
I guess yes, probably. It's so. I'd say maybe even 12 months ago. Even now to a degree, it sort of depends on your requirement. So with the changes being quite significant between 7 and 8. Most contrib modules required, a total rewrite of everything. So, especially, let's say 12 months ago, 24 months ago, you'd need, I was looking at work we had a brief for a client, and I looked at it and went, this is the list of modules I'd use to do it in Drupal 7. A third of those don't exist yet for Drupal 8. And another third are pre 1.0, so they're also maybe alpha or beta or development versions. So in that case, commerce was a big one for me for a while. In that case, maybe you want to go and use 7. Maybe there's still a scenario where that is the case. These days, I think there's most stuff, there is a version of 8 or there's an equivalent. So it might be the module A has been replaced by module B, but they do more or less the same thing. As I say, Drupal 8 is sort of the current version, and that will be going to 9, I say 2020, I think. 7 is still going to be around until 2021. I think that's right. So I think it's feature complete and feature freeze at the point Drupal 9 is released, and then security updates only for like 12 months after that or something. So
is it in a kind of an LTS type sort of scenario at the moment?
That if you wanted, you could say that way. And at least this was the case for me, 12 months ago, 24 months ago. It's like, do we want to look at doing this spec in Drupal 8, and it's going to take probably this much longer because we need to figure out which modules there are and things are sort of alpha beta versions. 7 is, it could be say LTS, because it's reliable and stable and you know what you're getting. Whereas, at this point, 8 is much more sort of stable.
And I guess this question really depends on the project, but is there much change and upgrade that a user has to do in terms of upgrading from 7 to 8?
7 to 8 is probably a rewrite at this point. So if you're writing any sort of custom code, you have to more or less just rewrite it
right,
pretty much from scratch. It depends what you're doing. But there are fundamental changes, like the way you declare a module, metadata for a module in Drupal 7 is for the .info file. So my module .info.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's sort of an any style sort of format.
Yeah.
Whereas in Drupal 8, that's moved to YAML. So you'd have to change that, change the extension.
I see.
And rewrite it. Part of it, like Form API, we've mentioned, is pretty much the same from 7 to 8. So you probably have to make minimal changes to that. But, in other places, you'd have to start, like permissions are all done through classes now to some degree. So if you want a complex permission, it's in some degrees it's fine. What is this sort of hook, we call them? It's just sort of non-object oriented events, essentially, is probably the best way I think to describe them. It's like, what has that hook been renamed to in Drupal 8? It's going to be moved into a service, most likely, and then how do you do that? So there is a documented upgrade path, and the API change records are really good. You can search for the thing that you were using; it'll sort of give you all the change records that you probably need to read. That's been pretty consistent through previous versions. You more or less have to make pretty big changes, breaking changes, and then look at sort of either for sort of 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, you could do an upgrade. So you'd sort of say, here's my database, put Drupal 7 on top of 6, run sort of essentially like a migration. That's a bad word to use. I'm going to use that in a minute. Like an in-place update, right, of your database.
Yes.
And it'll convert everything to the new way. In Drupal 8, that isn't a thing. You do need to do like an actual migration. So it has a migrate module built in, and you're having to say, move from X structure to Y structure, and it'll do that for you. The nice thing is, as I say, in 9, that's not going to be, to get from 8 to 9 is going to be considerably easier.
I was just about to ask you that. Yeah.
It's sort of like a la the Symfony style of go from 2 to 3. It's like, here are your deprecated stuff.
Yes.
Don't upgrade deprecated stuff, and you're going to be fine.
Whereas Symfony 1 to 2 was you just had to rewrite it. There was no. And
that's been maybe a big sort of hurdle, I guess, for some clients. It's only really going to be working for 3 years, and we have to rebuild it. Whereas the nice thing about the new system, the new sort of release cycle, is that we can keep adding new features like layout builder, and we've had a new experimental demonstration profile that went into core as part of the minor version. So we can either keep iterating and adding these new cool things. And then, especially with say I've mentioned PHP Unit Bridge. So as you're running tests, it's showing you, okay, using this deprecated thing. What I'd love to see eventually, I could make a feature request for it on Drupal.org. Just have like a little badge that says Drupal 9 compatible, because it's using all the up-to-date things.
That would be cool.
And that would be nice, because then in theory we're looking at I think some of the Laravel updates are like sort of 10 minutes. 10 minute updates go from sort of 5.7 to 5.8.
Wow.
Which it'll be quite nice to be sort of in that realm of things, rather than having to sort of rebuild everything from scratch. And, but there's issues obviously with that whole thing of just rebuilding everything every time. That's how bugs happen.
Sure.
So it'd be nice not to have that. That's sort of been my approach to most things, is to move the tests across first, run them, see what happens, and then start rebuilding the functionality. Or in some cases, if I had module without tests, is to write the tests for D7, then put those across. But when the modules I maintain, I think it's used by now it's about 30,000 sites. It was sort of less than that, back at the time. I think it was one of the first modules I ported across. There were already some tests there for Drupal 7, so I was sort of guided by those in terms of rebuilding. I'm still sort of fairly new to Drupal 8 at this point, but so I have to collect these tests and guide me and tell me what the next step is. That's quite a nice way of doing it, and also stopping regressions happening as you're applying. People are submitting patches for feature requests and things. So so testing has been quite quite a turning point, I think, for me. It's mentioned in PHP community a lot. Like, we're all writing tests, aren't we? Sort of scenario. Whereas
we should be. We should be writing tests. Yes.
I think Drupal in some ways is maybe still catching up a bit on that.
Yeah.
Core have got it so that Core has, if you want to submit a patch to Core, it's got to go through gates, essentially steps of things. One of which is testing. So essentially, new features have tests.
Yeah.
Bugs have tests to stop the regressions going back in. So Core is in a good place on that front. Every contrib module, is its own open source project. It's very much up to the maintainer to then go in and sort of write tests or not. And we've had issues where people have submitted a patch to fix a bug, and then it's then stuck in a needs test state because then people want the test to go along with it.
Yeah.
Which is great for me because I'll just go through the list to find stuff that need tests and I'll submit them. But yeah, there was a case recently. So I started writing a book called Test Driven Drupal, in which I'm building a conference site using Test Driven Development.
Right.
And I'm using a module within that called using a module within that as part of this. And I was writing my tests, and I couldn't get something to work the way I thought. It's like, why is this thing not passing? I was like, I'll go and take a look at the modules, the tests within inside the module. Which that's great from the documentation perspective. It's like, how is this thing supposed to work? Right?
Yeah.
But in this case, there weren't any, so I just I made an issue on their issue queue, said, add some tests, please. And then within the process of me writing those tests, I figured out what I need to do to make mine work. That's quite nice. So it is still, it's up to each maintainer to write their own tests.
Yeah.
It's up to that maintainer to enable Drupal CI to run those tests per patch.
Yeah.
But I think the trend is going in the right direction.
Right.
Where I think part of that is maybe because of that release cycle. So, say every 6 months there's a new version, and this shouldn't be breaking changes because these are minor. But I think it's fair to say we were new to this right at the beginning. So there may have been a couple here and there, maybe. Compared to Drupal 7, like you could write code on that, and because that sort of API isn't changing, or that code base isn't changing, you can be confident that your module's still going to work in 5 years.
Yes.
Whereas, potentially, who's to say that, adding layout builders are going to break your custom thing. So there could be conflicts between core or between core and your contrib or your custom code. So I sort of look at it now going, there's maybe a 6-month shelf life potentially, or I may need to revisit it within 6 months.
Yeah,
that's where the tests have been really important to make sure core isn't breaking my stuff, or vice versa.
Yeah, tests give a level of confidence, and I like to identify what tests are available when I choose various open source things. But you're right when you said that lots of modules don't have all the tests behind them. This is certainly the case for things like WordPress, where you're looking at a plugin, but you don't know how that plugin is going to be acceptable in this whole testing sort of sense. Now, you mentioned that that you're writing a book. What's the book called?
So it's called Test Driven Drupal.
Test Driven.
So I'm playing on the Test Driven Development TDD theme, just swapping out the last word. So
awesome.
It's been something I've wanted to do for quite a while, and so had a few ideas of what could I maybe write about.
Yeah.
And sort of one day to just bit the bullet instead of a MailChimp list, and sort of made a little landing page on my site, and sort of thought of these are the things I want to try and cover.
Right. Yep.
And then I've mentioned it, but I'm giving talks on testing. And write a few, quite a lot of articles on my site about Drupal and PHP and testing and getting things. So it's been sort of a little bit on the back burner for a while, and then sort of had some time off for Christmas, sort of evaluated what I was going to do. And something maybe I need some sort of example thing to build. Adam Warden's Test Driven Laravel is based around building this sort of ticketing application for gigs and things. So I was thinking of something I could do maybe around that front. So I think of settling on building a conference website, which like that covers most of the things that I was hoping to cover, and will come in handy for building the Drupal Camp Bristol site soon. So I think that's what we're going to do. I was driving home then that day thinking all these ideas going around. I did sort of think of this and think of this and think of this. And then just got home and did this big brain dump into Todoist. Right. So I've got all these to-dos.
Right.
The things I want to try and cover. So that was quite interesting. Probably with quite a lot of context. Some of the less code things. So like, which test do I start with first? So that became a bit more tangible. I think now I've got an actual sort of example of a criteria. So I've built most of sort of the call for papers side of things, actually submitting submissions, and you can't submit multiple so I can't submit after a close date, and you can multiple speakers, and you can only submit sessions with which you are a speaker. And so just again taking these sort of little sort of acceptance criteria type things. And it's surprising how sort of quick you can get. So, okay, I've got this little thing I need to do, and I'll start by writing some tests for that thing and go from there.
Awesome.
It's I'm building that up again sort of slowly. I think I've gone up. I think it's like 110, 12 people or something. But a couple of new signups after Drupal Camp in London.
Right.
So I need to start sending out some updates and things, even if it's just I'm doing this. It's been something I want to do for a while, and just to say, help everybody else sort of come up to speed a bit more on testing if they need to.
Yeah, and if any of the audience here wants to join the mailing list, what's the URL?
Go to testdrivendrupal.com.
Testdrivendrupal.com. Yeah,
and that'll just go to the landing page on my site. That's where I sort of cover a little bit of what the intended sort of list is going to be. Going to do a bit of updating on that now. I think I've settled on the conference theme, make it a bit more contextual. And there's just a form at the bottom.
Excellent.
But you can put your email address in, and you'll get added to the MailChimp list and start sending out some updates.
Wonderful.
Soon.
I will put the link in the show notes below.
Thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Oliver. Is there anything else that you want to discuss? Is there any social media links that you want to throw out there?
So you can go to my website. It's oliverdavies.uk.
Right.
I blog there quite a lot about Drupal, PHP, Git, testing, Tailwind, CSS, Vue.js, whatever I'm still working on at the time. I'm OP Davies on Twitter, GitHub, Drupal.org, pretty much everywhere. So follow me on those places. If you're in the area, come to PHP Southwest.
Yes.
Got meetups we do every month, and the Drupal Bristol meetups. I'm normally at both of those events, and I go around to all the other ones. So if you see me at an event, PHP meetup, conference, Drupal Camp, DrupalCon, say hi. That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
Oh, check out Microserve.
Microserve, yeah.
Microserve.io.
Microserve.io.
Say Drupal specialist development agency based in Bristol.
Well, thank you ever so much, Oliver, for coming on the show. I know that you're super busy, and it's we're both in the UK, and it's gone past. It's quite late, so I appreciate you coming on and speaking about Drupal. Thank you ever so much. That's all right.
Like long time listener, first time contributor.
Thank you ever so much for watching on the YouTubes and also listening on the podcasts. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.